Yeah, that's the general idea. You know how you really love the squeaky tennis ball and you think about it all the time and all you want to do is chase it. But then when you finally catch it, you just want another one. Hey friends, Little John Hammond here. You're watching Guitar Magic, the one and only van life travel show about the guitar and its people. Today we're headed to Carpinteria, California to hang with Jason Verlinde. Jason's the publisher of Fretboard Journal and a super interesting guy. Before we get there, I'd like to show a little gratitude. Guapo the Wondervan wouldn't be on the road if it weren't for our automotive angels, Go Westy, Top Shop Automotive, and my nephew Christian. I'd also like to thank the folks that loaned me tripods, GoPros, and guitars, or volunteered to help me film drone shots. Most of all, I'd like to thank all the Guitar Magic subscribers. It's viewers like you that make all the difference. Please subscribe. There's enough room in the van for everybody. And if you believe in the Guitar Magic like I do, please drop a few bucks in the tip jar for gas money or swing by the merch store for a premium t-shirt or hoodie. There's links to everything in the description below. Okay.
Yeah.
We're here with Jason Verlinde. Jason, welcome to Guitar Magic.
Thank you.
Studio Guapo.
I love it. I love this thing.
If viewers and listeners out there hear other cars pulling by, that's because we are in a van parked in a parking lot near a
popular bluff.
Near a popular bluff at the beach.
Yeah. And I'm just going to be dazing at all the cool features of this van. Throughout the interview, but I will make eye contact.
We can have a tour if you like. Jason, you are the publisher of Fretboard Journal.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just tell everyone what the locus of Fretboard Journal is. It's a magazine. And
yeah, so 16 years ago, we started this magazine called the Fretboard Journal, which was meant as an alternative to other guitar media at the time. It's a keepsake magazine filled with long-form interviews and histories and photo essays for the real guitar fanatics out there, folks who have already read all the Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton stories they're going to read but want to dig deeper. And so we interview folks who make instruments, we interview folks who are innovators in the world of guitar playing, interview some legends as well, but it's a very eclectic take on a guitar magazine.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it.
Thank you.
You've done incredible work with it over the years. And how many years now? 16 years, is that what you said?
16 years, yeah. Probably plotted it 17 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, it really is a nice alternative. I mean, I read all of the other guitar magazines growing up.
Some are great.
And they're good, but it really is sort of the guitar magazine for grown-ups, as I've heard it called,
yes.
and I tend to agree.
National Geographic for guitar players.
Yeah.
There's a couple of catchphrases.
It's got a lot of substance. And recently I noticed it's really transitioned to include different media. It's not just in print now. So what other things are related there?
Well, we started doing video probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago. We have a lot of artists who come through our office in Seattle, where we're based. And so it just became this natural extension of while we're here and while we're interviewing people for the magazine, we should have a couple video cameras. And that was sort of at the height of the DSLRs being able to shoot great video footage moment. And so we learned that, started doing videos both in-house at our office with touring acts who were coming through Seattle, as well as occasionally turning the cameras on people when we're interviewing them for the magazine at their studios or their homes. And then we started doing podcasting. So, that originally was kind of a scrappy way to keep in touch with our contributors, talk about stuff coming out in the magazine. And now we have a whole family of 5 different podcasts, everything from one called Luthier on Luthier, where one luthier interviews one of his peers, to a kind of goofy take on Car Talk, where an amp tech and I field questions from people really around the world about tube amps that are on the frets and kind of tell people how to fix them.
Yeah.
And then a Fretboard Journal podcast. We have a whole range of podcasts because they're relatively simple to produce compared to a fancy print magazine, and they're just a fun way to keep folks engaged while you wait between issues. Let them know what's going on, let them meet some of the personalities they may or may not read about in the next issue. It's just kind of a cool way to stay connected.
Yeah, it seems to have it allows you a lot of reach.
Yeah.
But a pretty easy cost point. I mean, it's not like you need to put it on paper.
Yeah, I mean, podcasting's funny because it's, it doesn't necessarily have the viral growth that if you did a great YouTube video or TikTok or any of this other stuff. But folks have definitely found out about the magazine through the podcast. Folks have found out about the podcast through the magazine. So it's kind of this little cool ecosystem. And we always hear from people every week who found us through the podcast and were like, oh, and you have a print magazine. Amazing.
Right.
And they had no clue. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Free marketing.
And you also have is this your Sweep the Floor? Is that your personal podcast? Or is that part of the Fretboard empire? How do you think of that?
It's kind of, I mean, it was my pandemic project. It was me, I've interviewed almost all of the great guitar makers. I'm really lucky that, it's one of the doors that's open to me through the Fretboard Journal. I've interviewed most of the guitar makers of note. And I also, though, follow all these people on Instagram and in real life who build stuff that has nothing to do with guitars. And so I was going through all these ideas. I'd like to think I'm an okay interviewer. And I was like, could there be a show where I interview somebody who makes like high-end kitchen knives or great boots that'll last a lifetime or restores cars? And so the Sweep the Floor was sort of the sweeping the floor of everything else, interviewing all those people and just having fun with it. And for the most part, people have been pretty receptive to a guy who puts out a guitar magazine that has nothing to do with the products they're selling and talking to me. And so I've done a handful of those, and I'm going to do them in batches probably. And just kind of, see where it goes. There's no money behind it. There's no sponsor. I mean, I had aspirations at the beginning of, maybe Yeti or a beer company will sponsor this. Now I'm just having fun and talking to people and hearing about what makes them tick. And a lot of the stories are very similar to the guitar maker stories. We're all introverted, neurotic, passionate people who went down some rabbit hole, and next thing you know, our lives have been transformed.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been thinking a lot about with, this guitar magic concept is, it's for guitar nerds and everything, but there's a lot of universal human things that show up in the guitar world that also show up in other places.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's probably room to focus more on that human universal part for me as a way of dealing with it. But you're right. I mean, it'll show up in every craft. It'll show up in every vocation, avocation. These people love that stuff.
Totally.
You are somewhat of an influential character in, I'll say, a corner of the guitar world.
Tiny corner.
But I'm wondering, you came to the guitar at some point. What do you consider your relationship with the guitar to be? Are you a player, an ambassador? What do you think?
I mean, I'm a poor player. I guess I am a ambassador / cheerleader more than anything. I don't fancy myself to be an influencer. We definitely talk about a lot of great guitars in our magazine and on our podcast, but I mainly just want to tell people that this world exists and that there's more to the world of guitars than you'll find at the mall store, if that's even left anymore. If there are any of those. There are people out there building sometimes 5 guitars a year, sometimes 15 or 20, working out of their garages, working out of their studios, and it's fascinating to hear all their stories. And then there are, on a bigger level, these great boutique guitar companies, and there's great music being played that you probably aren't going to find on your Spotify playlist or radio that, if you go seek it out, it's amazing. So I'm kind of the cheerleader of all that stuff.
Yeah. How did the guitar come into your life, or when? And how?
Man, I mean, I grew up with a single parent. My mom raised me, and she was way into going to flea markets and garage sales. And for whatever reason, I love music. I would gravitate towards the Tisco Del Rey at the garage sale or the weird funky stuff. And I had no knowledge. I wasn't a collector. didn't read Vintage Guitar Magazine when I was a kid or anything, so I probably passed over lots of cool things because I had no concept of them. But I remember buying, like, weird ukuleles and Teisco guitars and things like that, and carrying with, as I'd move out to college or whatever, those stayed with me, and I just had fun with them. I think I had an import banjo at one point that I was really trying to teach myself. And then I guess I was in my early 20s. I was working for a music magazine that Tower Records used to put out called Pulse. We had a lot of great illustrators and alternative comics contributing to that magazine. It was a really, for being a corporate magazine, put out a lot of interesting content, and that was like my first editorial job. And one of our contributors was Robert Armstrong, who was like one of the great musical saw virtuosos of the world. He played the saw on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and also plays a bunch of other great instruments. Anything with strings the guy can play, and accordion. So Bob came into our office once, and I was like, Bob, can you teach me how to play the saw? I just thought that would be like a funny, goofy alternative to everything else out there. So he invited me to his house. I drove over there. He gave me a very rudimentary saw lesson, and musical saws when you play a saw with like a cello bow, and it's very much ear training. It's like whistling. Like, you either can do it in tune or you can't, or you're warbling, which is probably what I do. But while I was at Bob's, like, the National guitars were glistening on the walls. The 16-inch Gibson L5 from the 20s, like Mother Maybelle Carter of the Carter family played, was there. He just has this like museum-grade collection of instruments, or did at the time. And I was just like a kid in a candy store. I was like, what's the story with that? What's the story with that? And that's really where, the guitar bug hit me. I've always been a music nerd. I've always loved music, but that was really the moment where I was like, oh, I gotta hear about the history of all this stuff. Because those are instruments you just never saw in stores. And certainly for a guy who grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, like, you never hear about them. So,
did anyone in particular help you get started or get over particular hurdles in the guitar, in your guitar progress?
Yeah, evolution? I mean, in terms of playing, no. I wish more people did. In terms of nerddom, the Fretboard Journal's co-founder, Michael Simmons, is an encyclopedia of musical instrument knowledge, and I'd meet him a few years later. He did some writing for me. Like I said, I was an editor at the time. I started working for Amazon, which was just beginning to sell music when it was still just a bookstore. Michael was one of our writers, and he would send me links to stuff. This is like the early days of the internet and selling stuff. But, I think Stan J at Mandolin Brothers had a great, at the time, website. Elderly Instruments probably had a great looking website, or at least a working website.
Right, functional.
And Michael would forward me, this is also the early days of eBay. So Michael would forward me these links of like, check out this amazing thing. And we really just kind of like, to get through the doldrums of like working, for me, a corporate job, and for him, freelance writing, like we would just kind of go back and forth all day long, wasting our employer's time, learning about stuff. And Michael knows everything. I mean, he's got a whole quiver of Selmer style, Macaferri, gypsy jazz guitars, a couple of the real ones. Like, he just knows everything. He worked for a guitar store for decades, still does at this point. So he's seen it all, and is kind of jaded, and like the guy that you want to be your older brother or, chaperone when you go to a guitar store. Like, check this out. Don't, that's been refinished. So he's probably the guy who really got me going on the minutia of instruments old and new.
Yeah, well, in our previous conversations, I think you're prone to minutia of all kinds of things.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. True.
We'll probably get to more of that in a second. I've been talking with people, and I think for everyone, the magic of the guitar is a little bit different. Sometimes it's a feeling you get when you're playing or when you're listening, and I don't know what it means to you, but whatever it is, what was the first time you really felt the magic of guitar?
Man, that's a big question. I came at the guitar as a music nerd. I was a music journalist. I was volunteered for a college radio station when I went to college. I'm the reason I'm not a good guitarist is because I'm such a music critic. I'm such a harsh music critic that if I flub a note or I sound bad, I'm like, I can't even listen to myself, and I'll go listen to the masters. So that's kind of self-defeating, sadly. But I saw some really amazing shows when I was pretty young, including like Townes Van Zandt and Alejandro Escovedo. They played together at this venue near where I was going to college, called the Palms in Davis, California. Those are shows that even as a jaded 22-year-old music nerd, like, would bring you to tears. And it was just a guy and a guitar. And that was really where the power of the guitar came from in my mind. Like, I was not steeped on classic rock, and I wasn't obsessing over Led Zeppelin tracks growing up. I was an introverted, nerdy kid. And so my guitar path is probably different from a lot of others because I really seek out the music that has some punch behind it. I was also really into punk and indie rock, and so I remember being obsessive about the band Jawbreaker. Saw them many times in Northern California. They were a highly influential punk band. And I remember reading about how Blake, the front man, played a Les Paul through a Marshall Plexi. And this was just in passing in some punk fanzine. But that was like, okay, there's something there. Now I kind of know a little bit about how the formula comes together, a little bit of the recipe. And so there were little moments like that. But at the all of my important music moments, all of my important guitar moments have to start with like amazing music that more often than not hits me emotionally. That's just kind of where I come at it.
Do you think everyone's open to that magic, that emotional connection? I mean, well, some people don't seem prone to being that open to it, but I'm surprised at how many people actually.
I think it's totally subjective. I mean, I think some people are moved by, a blues rocker that would leave me cold, and it gave them an opportunity to relax or forget about their day job in their own way, the same way that I need to go and hear Townes Van Zandt basically make me want to jump off a bridge. Or Bill Frisell bring me to tears with, some beautiful rendition of What the World Needs Now. Like, I need that stuff. Other people need other stuff. It's totally like we're all wired a little differently.
Well, you say you don't fancy yourself an influencer, but you do have some influence.
The Fretboard Journal does.
The Fretboard Journal. So I mean, you're a guy. Like, I've been at the NAMM show, and people smile at you. Yeah, I think they know. And I've spoken to other folks, and everyone agrees that you've been really supportive of, sometimes the underdog or people that are new on the scene, in what is really kind of a competitive, or seems like a competitive guitar market or guitar world. You've been really supportive of me, for example, which I thank you for.
Sure.
But I'm wondering, why do you think you're so supportive of everyone? Not everyone is.
I mean, we are the underdog. I mean, when we started 16 years ago, I think most companies, especially the larger ones, probably gave us a year tops to last. I feel like the guitar community, especially our little niche of the guitar community, I'm talking about folks who, build both acoustics and some electric builders as well, but, more boutique-y, more handmade, perhaps. We all sort of speak the same language, and a rising tide lifts all boats, and the Fretboard Journal is really a discovery vehicle. We're like the minor league baseball team where some of the guys will go on to the big leagues, and some of them may not, but they're still cool, and so, I think for us, celebrating the entire world of, like, if you're doing something authentic, if you're doing something that matters, if you're passionate about what you're doing and it's of a high quality, like, we're going to champion you as best we can. And I hope that folks will champion us as well. Like, we are not in the business to necessarily sell a bunch of ads, which is really what most magazines, guitar or otherwise, are in business to do. Our readers support us. They trust me and our contributors. They trust that they're going to get a certain level of quality and lack of BS and knowledge. We really, when we write articles, we really assume that you do kind of know your way a little bit around a guitar. And I don't mean like technique wise and that you know how to do a bunch of shapes or do a bunch of voicings. It's more just like, all right, our readership is educated, I hope, and passionate, and you wouldn't be picking up a $15 magazine if you were just casually into it. So there's a filter there. And everybody who reads our magazine or listens to our podcast kind of lives and breathes it. And so we're able to just kind of have fun with it. And I love hearing about, we were talking earlier about a new festival that might be happening for the world of guitars. I love it when people have great ideas like that. And some of them may work and some of them may not, but it's not my place to judge them. It's just my place to be telling the world about it and broadcasting it and hope some people show up.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is there any aspect of the guitar world or maybe the magazine world or any of that where you feel competitive with anyone? I mean, and maybe just on a personal level.
Yeah.
And, just to put it in context,
Yeah.
like I have some friends that I've been playing guitar with since I was 17 years old,
Yeah.
and still when I hear them tearing it up, I go home and I practice harder.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope it's healthy. I'm not sure about it. I'm wondering, is there any of that with you about anything?
I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't competitive. I mean, I think the reason the Fretboard Journal looks the way it does and costs as much as it does for me to even just produce it, and why we have such beautiful photographs and interesting layouts for our stories, is because at the end of the day, I probably am a little competitive and I want to make the greatest guitar magazine that I can make, maybe that has ever been made. That would be amazing. Not saying that I've done that yet, but it'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, I always wish that we had more listeners and readers and eyeballs on our videos. I always wish that we had more followers than we do, even though we have done pretty well for ourselves. We could always be doing better. And there are always guitarists out there who are like, I've never even heard of you. You've been around for 15 years, really? There's always that. That's going to happen for another 20 years probably. But yeah, I mean, I try to just stay in my lane and focus on what I'm doing and not get too bogged down on what another magazine is doing or what another podcast is doing, because I kind of feel like that can taint you a little bit and kind of affect, I think people pay us money for the vision that I have and our contributors have and that our videographers have and our podcasters have. And if you're just trying to mimic what else is out there or do what they're doing because you're trying to sell same ads that they're selling, that doesn't appeal to me. I think that's a recipe for disaster, actually.
Yeah. In terms of it sounds like you're competing with yourself a lot too.
Oh yeah. I always want to raise the bar.
Yeah.
I mean, we're about to put out our 50th issue at the end of this year, and I'm hammering on my designer and our small tiny staff of like, all right, what are we going to do differently? How are we going to revolutionize this? And everyone's kind of like, I'm trying to rally the troops here, which is kind of dumb because it's just, it's 50 issues. That's cool, but it's like kind of arbitrary too. We should just keep making little subtle refinements. So.
Yeah, hang on. Let's give it 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're in a parking lot, there's an enormous Ford truck. It really is enormous. Diesel. There it is. Oh, it seems to have relocated. That's good. I mean, maybe you don't ever get this, but is there anybody who's, you have to feel good about it in your gut, but is there anybody whose approval you're sort of secretly wanting? Like, who is it when they say, oh, Jason, man, that was a really awesome something. Who is it?
I mean, a lot of it is the musicians and the builders that we, have been in relationships with or have, championed for a long time. Like when they tell me that they've actually read an issue, like that's amazing. When Bill Collings was around, founder of Collings Guitars, like he was a harsh critic of everything, including their own instruments. when he actually would say he took the time to flip through the magazine and like give me feedback, or it sounded like he had read an article, that was huge. Same thing when a great musician like Joe Henry or Bill Frisell comes by, or we talked and like they actually remark on something they picked up on in the Fretboard Journal, that carries me for months. Like, that's all I need to last, all the hardships that I'm going to endure and all the, crappy stuff of being a small business owner. And there's plenty of that. So, yeah.
I mean, I think I can speak for myself. I don't know about you. Yeah. I'm starting to age out of really having heroes because I'm starting to realize that they're all human, but there are some guys that are, and gals that are kind of heroes.
Yeah.
Is there just a few that come to the top of your mind in the guitar world?
Oh my God. I mean, I'm not going to answer this question well. I mean, there are so many great players out there, and that's a very boring answer to this question, but Blake Mills, Bill Frisell, people we've actually written about are a couple of my favorites. I love what Phoebe Bridgers is doing. I don't know that anyone would consider her a guitar hero, but like her music is ridiculous.
Yeah, my daughter turned me on to it, and I'm so knocked out by it.
Yeah.
And you turned me on to Blake Mills.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, by the way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like we're always kind of like looking in the weeds, going like, who's bubbling up, So.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna just pivot a little bit. Can you tell me about a specific life lesson that the pursuit of the guitar has taught you?
Well, I mean, I think that the two things there's probably been a few things, but a couple of things that the guitar has taught me are, keep practicing, never give up, because everybody that we interview, and it's a life lesson that I need to take. I need to remind myself all the time, like it takes practice. It's not something that comes naturally to anybody. It's, it requires work. It requires work. You have to put the work into the guitar to get the beauty out of it. And that goes probably for the people who make the guitars too, but definitely for any of us who pick one up and try to play it. The other life lesson, which, you probably from your background can relate to, is just like, be nice. The musicians that I interview, some famous session musicians that, went on to rewrite music history, their formula was they weren't jerks and they showed up on time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily that they were that much better than the other guy, but they were nice and they were easy to work with.
Do you play guitar primarily alone, or do you play in bands?
No, primarily exclusively alone. Not even the kid or the wife, hang out with me. The guitar is my outlet. When everyone's gone to bed, I will go and either find a quiet room where I can play or plug in, or turn some Red Bull ski movie on and mute it and just kind of stream of conscious play alongside, maybe try to work on a song while I'm watching something on TV, muted. It's very much my meditation, I guess, at this point. I have definitely played in a few band contexts way back in the day, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. No one wants to hear me. I'd rather go hear musicians I love.
I'm kind of torn. I either want to ask you about a guitar of a friend's that you borrowed and you didn't want to give it back, or if there is just a particular guitar in general that has a real meaningful space in your heart.
Oh, man. I mean, I have a couple of guitars that are pretty important to me. One of which, my mother, I was telling you about my mom and I going to garage sales and flea markets. My mom found a 30s Gibson LOO at a flea market for like $200. And not that long ago. We're talking like 10 years ago. I've seen a lot of guitars. I've played a lot of guitars. A lot of people send the Fretboard Journal guitars to borrow or try out for a couple of weeks. But that guitar, which I've done absolutely nothing to aside from change the strings, I just always go back to. I mean, it's the one that I will, I'm hoping it survived the heat wave of Seattle when it was like 111 degrees in my house. Hopefully it did. But that is one guitar that I would never let go of. In terms of guitars that I covet, man, I don't have the lust for the 59 Les Paul that so many people do. I do love a nice Telecaster. I do also, I do think that the 16-inch L5 Gibson L5 from like the 20s is pretty much the perfect guitar. Like I could probably get rid of everything and just have one of those if I could swing it. I can't. But that is a guitar where whenever I've seen one, a musician named Matt Munisteri, who comes by the Fretboard Journal semi-regularly, who I adore, he's got a really beat-up player's grade one. Michael Simmons, the magazine's co-founder, has one. Like Bob Armstrong had one. Those guitars are just aesthetically and tonally perfection in my book.
They're the ones that,
for me,
warm your...
For me, because I mean, I think there's an argument to be made of like, yes, a Blackguard Telecaster is amazing, but then also a new Telecaster can be pretty darn good. But those early 16-inch Gibson L5 arch tops, like Mother Maybelle Carter played, it's just kind of like, it's like an art statement.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to replicate.
Yeah. I fell in love with arch tops pretty early on. I mean, I grew up in the the metal era of the 80s, and everyone was into that. And then I went and studied with a jazz guy for a little while, and I realized, wow, these instruments are beautiful, and they're different. Well, I mean,
it's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing, and I'm sure there's experts out there that already know what we're talking about, so I won't belabor the point. But yes, they have a whole different sonic footprint, and they make you think and feel and play different, I think.
Totally.
Do you ever feel like you're working out emotional issues through the guitar?
Well, I feel like putting out a guitar magazine gives me plenty of emotional issues. I mean, I think we've all, plugged into an amp and cranked it and probably worked out some aggression or something. I've never had much success transferring my innermost thoughts into songwriting, although I did read that Jeff Tweedy book that came out last year.
Oh, yeah, how to write one song or something?
I found it to be helpful to just have like a little short-term goal. But yeah, I think most of my emotional issues might be triggered from being in the guitar industry, which is its own roller coaster ride. So I'm not sure if the guitar balances that out or not. So.
Self-fulfilling.
Yes, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you about this too. At one point, you were at this little place called Amazon.
Yeah.
And, somehow you made this transition into the guitar, and not only into the guitar world, but like a corner of the guitar world.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't even like the big sweet spot of the guitar world.
Painted myself into a corner of the guitar world.
I was wondering, were you hell-bent on doing that? Did people think you were totally nuts for doing it? Or was it just the right time, the right thing?
I don't think people
Would you have done it anyway?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did. I don't think that any of the advice I got from people in the magazine industry or in the music journalism industry, I definitely didn't heed any of it. This was 2005 when we planted our flag and went to a NAMM show with a little brochure mock-up of what the Fretboard Journal would look like. And, I had a good day job, but I was also burned out, I mean, I think not just Amazon, but a lot of .com companies back then and certainly now churn out people pretty quickly, and there's not a lot of work-life balance. So I was in a position that I think a lot of people find themselves in, where it's like, okay, you've finally made a salary. I wasn't rich at all, definitely not now, but I had made enough to where I, could pay my bills and maybe buy one nice-ish guitar a year. And I started to find other outlets than just letting work consume everything. So I got into the world of guitar more. I was looking at other guitar magazines. I was seeing what else was out there. And I've always had this sort of like artistic design snob side of me. I used to do letterpress printing when I was in college, which is a whole nother chapter we didn't even talk about because I don't want to bore everyone to tears. But, I used to hand set lead type and learn from this guy who makes books that cost $5,000 and really got a sense of typography and design from that person. And then I'd look at these guitar magazines, and I was really into guitars, and guitars were starting to cost more than ever before. And I'd be like, why do these look so cheap when the guitars they're writing about look so fancy? And so I had it in my head. I just had this like vision of what the Fretboard Journal was going to look like, what magazines it was going to be like, what magazines it wasn't going to be like. And we went to that NAMM show, and at least with the brands that we were speaking to, and many of them are the same brands we're still speaking to, the Martins and Gibsons and Collings of the world. They totally got it. They were like, oh wow, a fun new way to target new audiences and appeal to affluent customers. We love it. They were into that. But crystal balling it, like print media was definitely not on the rise. So yeah, I mean, I think the saving grace of the Fretboard Journal has been we've always been this sort of goofy reader-supported alternative to what people mostly think of as magazines. And so we have been able to ride out a recession. We have been able to ride out advertising ebbs and flows because our readers, small but mighty, have wanted to see it last. But yeah, the idea was crazy. I mean, I don't, would I tell my younger self to do this again? I'm not sure. Maybe I would have said, hey, how about you just find a middle ground and get a job that you like a little less, that's less taxing, and just buy some nice guitars. Maybe hang out with musicians once in a while. You don't need to interview them. And you see that all the time. You follow people on Instagram who, kept their job and seem to be living a pretty good life and geeking out on music just as much as you are. And then you see people who aren't. So, there's no roadmap. And, but yeah, this was definitely a gamble that somehow I'm still breaking even. Let's put it that way.
Still breaking even.
The house hasn't won just yet.
I was going to ask you if you had ever made a quick and potentially bad financial decision related to guitar, but it sounds like maybe
I started a guitar magazine.
Yeah,
That's totally it. Yeah, it was slow though.
Check. Started guitar magazine.
Yeah. I mean, I did buy. At one point, I bought a really goofy custom guitar that I thought was going to be just this end-all quirky guitar that I would love, and it was never. When you pay a deposit to a luthier, someone who makes guitars, and wait a year or two for your vision or their vision or the collaboration to yield something. There's some trust there and there's some faith. And I got a guitar back that was, I'm sure the guitar maker thought it was a perfect execution of what we talked about, but there were just a couple of little, I won't even say compromises, but just, I was like, oh, really? We're doing that? I know where you bought that. I kind of thought this whole guitar wasn't going to look like it was off-the-shelf stuff. So I never really bonded with that guitar, and it moved on. But, yeah, I mean, that's neither here nor there.
Even I notice when you talk about guitars, you're cautious not to mention a brand or something like that. Being someone who has a voice in the community, you try to stay on some neutral territory. You may have your personal preferences or whatever, but you're never broadcasting one or the other as the best. It seems like it's like it's a real fair thing. Like everyone can like whatever everyone likes, and but you are pretty unique in the fact that you're at the center of this, guitar corner of the world. And although, again, you don't love the word influencer, you are a bit of an influencer, and you do have the power to help deserving people. And I was kind of wondering, do you think of that as that ability to have influence? Do you think of that as a responsibility or an obligation or a privilege?
I mean, it's a privilege. I want anyone who listens to our podcast, anyone who picks up our magazine, I mean, it's buyer beware, let's be honest. Like, there have been plenty of luthiers who had stellar reputations and then maybe didn't go off the deep end, but maybe their quality diminished or they had personal problems. There have been plenty of companies that had stellar reputations and were churning out great guitars, by the thousands, and then quality control went down or something. So you kind of, you need to do your due diligence with any of this stuff. I do feel, though, that guitars are such a personal thing. Like, there are people out there who just want a Stratocaster, and that is what sings to their heart, and they are going to find one. And then there are people who want to geek out about random flat top guitar maker this person versus this person. So what we do is we try to tell people the best guitar stories we can. We want to share the biographies and the ups and downs of these people, and kind of get you engaged in learning about them, and then really send you on your way. And then it's up to you whether you put a deposit down on that guitar, or you go to your local dealer and try out that instrument, or what have you. And so, yes, we've turned a lot of people on to great guitars. I mean, I get that feedback all the time, and most of the feedback has been completely positive, because if nothing else, we've just told people about builders and facets of the music world they didn't even know about before, which is a really cool thing. So I guess I feel like that's my responsibility going forward, is just keep telling stories, keep sharing knowledge, keep having interesting people in our magazine and on our podcasts, and hope for the best.
You talk about, telling the stories.
Yeah.
And I know you've been sort of in the world of the journalism and the story writing for a while. After all of this time, do you have a sense of the key facets that make a story a good story, or what you think is going to make a good story? Are you looking for certain things when you're trying to figure out how to dedicate page space?
No. I mean, yes and no. I think I know what I don't want more than I know what I want. And so what I've been telling a couple of freelancers recently, like in the last 48 hours, is like, I want to throw everything that you think we want out the window. I don't want to ever just make a magazine known for long stories, or I don't want to ever make a magazine known for, they write about handmade guitars. I want to have fun. I want people to go celebrate venues that are quirky and cool, or record stores, or things that feed the guitar habit, that aren't necessarily just, hey, this woman makes 10 guitars a year. Here are her favorite tone woods. Like, that's really boring. And we can definitely fall into that rut, because we are putting out a magazine regularly. That is a big part of our deal, is writing about guitar makers. But, it's that emotional reaction. And sometimes, and I think it's been a long realization for me as a writer, primarily. I do a bunch of other things now, but I'm coming at it from a writer background, a journalism background, to realize that sometimes photo essays that don't have a whole lot of text are just as poignant and as informative as some 3,000 word article. Oftentimes videos are more compelling and poignant and informative than that same article or that same podcast. And sometimes podcasts are, and so figuring out, if this is the thing we're trying to celebrate, or this is the point we're trying to get across, like, what's the best medium for it? What's the most unique medium for it? What's the most unique angle? Like, there's no one size fits all, which makes it fun, makes it challenging, probably drives a lot of our writers nuts, who just want directions of I want a 10-page article on this great person who just put out this great record. And I'm like, I don't want you to talk about their new record. They've already talked about their new record. How about we talk to them about 1976 and what they were doing back then, for no real reason, but it was an important year for them, So there's a lot of that going on. I'm sure I infuriate most of our contributors with my wishy-washiness and visions of grandeur or whatever.
It's funny. I can only imagine the phone calls. No, that was a really good article. It's just that, could you make it more about 1976?
Yeah, I mean, there is a, we also have freedom in that we're not coming out every month like a lot of magazines and guitar magazines are. And so we don't need to stick to a formula. We can be a little goofy. We can hopefully be more interesting too, at least sometimes. So, I think a lot of people who are full-time journalists are like, hey, I need to write X number of stories a month to pay my bills, and I need to make them efficient, and hey, that makes perfect sense, and I would be doing the exact same thing, but I always want the Fretboard Journal to have a little bit different spin on things.
Yeah. something that's been on my mind a lot as I'm trying to think of people I would like to drive across the country and interview is that the guitar world used to be sort of an old white guy's world.
Sure.
And now I'm starting to see a lot of, I'm really happy about it. And I don't know how it happened exactly, but a lot more diversity. And
Sure.
there's a lot of, talk in the media about diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice. And some of these are lofty topics, but I was thinking just the mere fact that we have to pick who we're going to show that represents the guitar community. It's like, it's hard because I think a lot of what we know, because the history of it is a bunch of old white guys, isn't maybe where it's going necessarily.
Yeah.
Have you had to struggle with that at all to figure out?
Oh, all the time. I mean, it is constantly on my mind, and it's very much a chicken or the egg question. Is the guitar world a bunch of white guys because we only write about a bunch of old white guys? Or, we want to be as inclusive as possible. I also want to have the most interesting guitar stories and celebrate the most interesting guitar music possible, and that's totally subjective. That's just my mind, and I'm a white guy. But yeah, I mean, we do, in general, I'm talking about the Fretboard Journal and the world at large, need to make a more concerted effort to be inclusive and to celebrate people who are different than us, people who look different than us, maybe make music that's different than us. We've definitely done some baby steps. I'm my own worst critic about this stuff. Like, we've definitely featured more women. We've definitely made a point over the last couple of years to get more people of color who are doing things in line with what we love. We are still, at the end of the day, guitar-based music that, I want to be able to, I want everything that we write about in the magazine to be something that I actually would listen to on a long car ride.
Right, yeah.
And of course, people of color make that music too, but I don't want to ever just include people to include people. That wouldn't be authentic to them. It wouldn't be authentic to the magazine. So I do, it is a constant dance and a constant opportunity to remind yourself of, like, we can do better than what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And there has been, as one anecdote, I interviewed a young blues guy named John Tavius Willis a year ago. He was doing, and still is, this thing on YouTube called the Robert Johnson Challenge. And this guy can sound like Robert Johnson, like nobody's business. I interviewed him, loved hearing his story. Definitely not somebody I would have ever crossed paths with. He doesn't tour Seattle, although he does occasionally do, like, blues festivals. But I'm not really super rabid blues guy necessarily regularly. But it turned out that, as almost just his hobby, he's interviewing his blues heroes. He's interviewed Taj Mahal. He's interviewed Paul Washer, all these amazing people. And so I'm like, you need your own podcast. And we hosted his podcast called Diddy Wah Diddy for like 5 or 6 episodes. And I hope he'll come back and do more of them for us. But it was just one of those things of, like, I could talk to you till I'm blue in the face, but, like, you need your own show because you're going to do a way better job. And you're a bluesman. Like, you are the real deal. I'm going to ask the dumb questions that some guy from the periphery asks, but we've captured some great music history through that, and shed light on their stories, Taj's and Paul Washer's and a couple other musicians, and so that's been really cool. And we need to do more of that. We need to get more contributors and staff people who are, women and of color, and just get more viewpoints who all are speaking the Fretboard Journal language, though, of, like, quality music, great gear, interesting storytelling.
Yeah. I realized that was a doozy of a question. I hope I didn't put you on the spot.
No.
So a lot of people are really uncomfortable talking about it. I think for obvious reasons. No one wants to say the wrong thing, but it's like, I was just wondering if it's something you wrestled with. I have following of 0 at this moment, and but it's something that's on my mind of, like, how do I do this responsibly?
Oh, it's constantly on my mind because I don't want to I don't want to put this under a microscope, but like we put out a tube amp podcast. There's literally like 3 women in the world of tube amplifiers who are servicing them or designing them, and by all accounts, like almost no one of color, like at all.
Yeah.
Like we would have talked to them had we been able to. I've put out, I think on episode 10, I'm the dumb guy on that show. I'm like the Andy Richter or the Ed McMahon. I'm like this funny co-host who doesn't know much about, the subject at large. So I'm like, is there anybody of color out there? If so, please drop me a line. And there's radio silence.
Really?
Meanwhile, we get requests all the time. Like, when are you going to feature this guy? When are you going to feature this guy? We have featured one of the few women in the world of amp teching, and we'll feature her again, and she's since blown up. Like, she's got a YouTube channel and is kicking ass at it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want it to be an old white guy magazine. I know that's most of our readership, but I also want the Fretboard Journal to be around long after those guys have died, long after I die. I want it to celebrate the entire, spectrum of the Fretboard universe, whatever that is.
I've always appreciated that you treat the Fretboard Journal as a keepsake, and everything is, you try and write in evergreen terms.
Yeah,
you try not to mark anything with years or specific events that will go back in history, and everyone will recognize that was Lollapalooza of 1990, whenever it was.
It makes me cringe that our new issue, which is mailing the week that you and I are talking, has like 3 images of people wearing masks due to COVID.
Yeah.
And I am the biggest proponent of COVID vaccines and wearing your mask ever, but I hate that timestamp got put on the magazine that I love. And I want, and hopefully, fingers crossed, like we'll kick this COVID thing sooner than later, and masks will be an afterthought, but
that'll be the collector's item.
Yeah, but it's one of those things of like, it's almost like seeing somebody with a giant cell phone that like the briefcase one. Yeah. It's like, oh, I hate that. It's ruined so many great movies when you like see that,
Yeah. I'm moving towards the end here. I just want to wrap up. You're a guitar nerd.
Yeah.
You live in the guitar world, and you have for a while. Do you have 1 or 2 things that are on your guitar bucket list? It could be owning a guitar or playing with someone. And they don't even have to be realistic possibilities, but do you have 1 or 2 or 3 things that you just, if you were on your deathbed, you'd say, yeah, I did that?
At this point, if I'm being totally honest and maybe a little self-effacing, it's just to become a better guitarist. Like we are talking from sunny, almost California. I took my first, maybe last surf lesson this morning. This was something that I wanted to do for 40 years, like my entire life, since I was a kid, and but I was always scared to do it, and I was always like petrified of the ocean, and I finally am like, I'm gonna be 50 soon. If I'm gonna do this, I need to do it. And I did it this morning, and maybe I'm just riding that wave, sorry to be cheesy, but like that was so scary to me that now the prospect of like taking a private Zoom guitar class doesn't seem scary. Maybe in a week it will again, but I want to get better at guitar. I want to be able to, as you hopefully will do in this beautiful van, travel more, find the time. As much as I love the NAMM show and going to the big guitar shows, the really meaningful stuff happens when you just hit the road or get on a plane and have a one-on-one reaction or interaction with some of the folks that I'm in our universe, guitar makers, players. I want to free up my time to just be able to do more of that. That's really where the fun stuff happens. So that's kind of my long-term goal. It's not like I want to be at the next I don't want to jam with Neil Young. I think that ship has sailed. I'm not gonna. I don't know. It's just little. It's little things like that tend to get backburnered.
For a long time, I always had guitar was some type of redemption moment in my mind. Like one day I'm going to do this and I'm going to be complete. And then at some point, maybe just even not that long ago, I realized this guitar thing's going to go on forever. It's going to outlive me.
Sure.
You know, I'm going to try the best I can, and then I'm going to die, and someone else is going to do the best they can.
Yeah.
There is no end to this.
No.
I wanted there to be, like, the moment where your friends come to the club and they high-five you.
Yeah,
And,
get a gold watch.
yeah, but it's not going to be like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't... as with the owning a small business and a guitar magazine, I don't have an exit plan, and I don't have an exit plan with the guitar either. I just want to do it till the day I die, and I want to keep meeting interesting people and keep being able to play it as best I can, however modest that might be. And so, yeah, there's no real, like, brass ring to grab. It's more just like, I want to have more fun with it.
Well, I'm glad it's bringing you some joy.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending a little time talking with me.
Thanks for pulling the van up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it rolls, so we got to get it where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Is there any place where you think viewers and listeners should be checking more out about Fretboard Journal or you or Sweep the Floor or any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Sweep the Floor you're going to have to find on your own, which is only a Google search away. But fretboardjournal.com is where you can see pretty much all of our content, including all the podcasts, read up on the magazine. The way that social media and everything works is like, you know, you might follow something on Instagram or Facebook, but you won't necessarily see all the posts from your favorite brand or person. There's algorithms at play and all sorts of behind the scenes stuff. But at fretboardjournal.com, you can see every single video we've ever put out, every single podcast, all these different podcasts we've been talking about. You can get a glimpse of what the magazine looks like too. And so it's old school, but it's still the way to learn about us. And I will give a plug to our newsletter, which comes out only once a month, but I tend to go overboard and like get real passionate about our newsletter. So there's a whole ton of content in our newsletter that you'll never find anywhere else, just because I start riffing on like music that I'm loving or things that have happened in my life or cool interviews that took place. And it has sort of taken on its own little weird life of its own. And you have to be a subscriber to because it doesn't live anywhere else. So,
well, there you have it, everyone. Yeah. You know what to do. Well, thanks again for
thanks, John.
Jumping in the van with me. And
fantastic. If I got to get in a weird old van, it's gonna be with you.
Yeah.